love to have a show of hands. Who here knows what a frame is? Okay. Okay, so there's a bunch of you that don't know, so I'll make sure to explain it and sort of have a sort of intro to it. I'm David Furlong. I've been working on Frames.js, which is a library for making frames, and then also Open Frames, which is a standard for frames that work in multiple ecosystems. Okay, the clicker isn't working. Can we get some tech support? Oh, okay, now it's working. Okay, so before we start with frames, I thought I'd quickly explain why frames sort of make sense to begin with. I think there are three key problems to crypto UX. The first is safety. Today you sign transactions with your wallet. They could be malicious and they could take all your money. The second one is simplicity. A lot of transactions require things like transaction simulation and very complex interfaces that, we've gotten very used to as crypto users in navigating. But I don't know if you've tried sort of bridging lately, but even that is sort of pretty terrifying. So when we're thinking about onboarding the masses, and especially in social, that's something that's sort of top of mind. Simplicity is very important. And then thirdly, speed. So a lot of crypto apps rely on things like Wallet Connect. And in my experience, this has been sort of a lot of steps that are confusing, sometimes don't work, and it makes it very slow to do something. And when you add a lot of friction to an action, consumers are less likely to do them. So what is a frame? So a frame is a new type of embed that when a link is shared on a social network like Farcaster, instead of showing a little card image and just a link to the website, a frame allows the developer to specify actions, so buttons, and optionally an input that then can sort of be displayed by the app into this sort of mini app. And so this allows developers and websites to express a small little nibble of their app in this other app. And the second part that makes frames interesting is that when a user presses on one of these buttons, the website, for example, the Girl Scout cookies website, gets a signature that the user that has that identity actually took that action. And so that allows the website to essentially authenticate the user and do actions on behalf. So for example, I can press a button and the Zora app will let me automatically follow someone on the Zora app without ever leaving Warpcast. So frames originated in Farcaster, but now they're supported across numerous ecosystems. So XMTP, Lens, base profiles, and we have an extension for X as well that brings frames there. So do frames today solve the three problems of crypto UX? So because this is a lightning talk and I have very little time, I'm only concerned with the technical problems around this. So there's other problems that are sort of less technical, like distribution of frames. But starting off with safety. So frames, so Warpcast innovated on frames by allowing people to mint with a sort of point system called warps. And that allowed people to transact with contracts without actually signing transactions with their wallets. And so that's sort of a safer way of doing micropayments than sort of traditionally in crypto, where you sign a full transaction for every little payment. And so that's worked for some types of transactions, but other types of transactions still require a wallet signature. Next, simplicity. This works for some things, but for example, chess doesn't work very well. Speed, it works for a lot of small things, but as soon as you get into more complex games or sort of 5-step games, a lot of the sort of experiences become limited by the speed of frames. And that's because of the way frames work. Everything at the top there is an image, and image generation is kind of slow. So where do we go from here? So there's been some discussions and innovations on sort of mini apps as another type of technology that are similar to frames, where frames are good for certain things like entry points, one-step flows, and transactions, and maybe mini apps can be a more expressive layer beyond that. Thank you. Any questions? Happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. So we have about 4 minutes. Either you guys can quickly hop into the session QR code to ask questions, or we can quickly just pass around the mic for David to answer if anyone has any questions. 2 minutes. Don't miss the opportunity. Right here.
What's the difference between mini apps and frames, technically?
Right, so a frame can only express up to 4 buttons and an input and an image. Mini apps are really like mini websites, so you can do sort of full programming, you can have full interactivity. And so we've seen mini apps, for example, in Telegram, in the world ecosystem now, and Farkas is also exploring mini apps as well.
So with frames, you're using images for your outputs. With mini apps, is it the regular web technology?
Yeah, that's right. Which has different trade-offs, right? So when a user is interacting within a mini app, it's sort of like an untrusted environment. So while if I sort of confirm a payment inside a frame, the sort of Warpcast or the parent app knows that the user actually pressed on that button. Whereas if you're inside a mini app, then it's sort of up to the mini app, and you can't really rely on what the mini app is doing or the user is pressing within the mini app, because the mini app could sort of be malicious or say the user is confirming the transaction, but there's no way for the sort of parent app to know that.
Amazing, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Right there.
Hey, is Frames.js has a SDK or API that we can work on and test how does the mini app would look like in Frames?
Yeah, so Frames.js has a debugger and it has support for mini apps. So you can debug and sort of test the initial specs of mini apps. The mini app spec in Farcaster is still evolving and in a draft phase. So we already support it, but now the specs changed. So yeah, and then we'll also have support for mini apps in open frames. And so that's sort of a new technology that's coming that's very exciting, I think.
All right, thank you very much. Let's give it up for David for giving us that amazing lightning talk and giving us his time. Thank you very much.